I keep finding myself completely drawn to hard games with weird movement, like a moth drawn to a flame that twists its little moth nipples when it gets too close. Lately it's been this insanely good climbing game Peaks of Yore that is literally goated. But when I got the notification that Egging On was released, I came down off the mountain and traded in days of endless peaking for a simple life. That being the life of the humble egg just looking for its place in the world, which I think is really relatable. I think we've all felt the pull between an endless frustrating struggle and accepting that those precious calories you're using might be better used to fuel another hungry human's tank. But until someone responds to my Craigslist ad, I'm here and I'm egging it. To start off, Egging On is the spiritual successor to the 2024 Polyjam entry What Came First, a game about the hubris of a chicken that can't help but shake its juicy thigh meat every time it's 5 seconds in front of an egg in a life or death race. And while What Came First controls a bit more like a standard platformer with a sprint and a more normal jump, Egging On is an extremely hard rage tower game with super unique controls and a world fractured into various segments. You start off at the very bottom in the dirt, and you have to get climbing. At your disposal is a grand total of 2 moves, rolling and egg jumping. And if you've ever played golf with your friends, you already know egg is one of the worst rolling shapes, only behind the acorn and Satan's own ball choice, the cone. So with that in mind, let me tell you this game is insanely frustrating from the start learning to wrangle your egg right up until the final minutes, although the back half is annoying for completely different reasons that I'll get to later. But with that being said, I do want to make it clear that it doesn't mean this isn't a rewarding or worthwhile experience to subject yourself to. The first thing you'll need to know when getting control of your egg is how to roll it. Essentially, if you input a direction, the egg moves in that direction. Okay, maybe it's not that simple. The egg is a physics-based object and will attempt to roll in that direction, but what kind of insane maneuvers it takes to move with your input is a complete mystery until you're rolling off an edge and realize you should have never assumed to understand the workings of an egg.
Take a break. I'll wait.
Over time, you'll learn to better control this thing, and that really comes down to accepting that in certain situations, you have almost no control at all, and ripping those pages right out of your moveset repertoire. Probably the most important thing to know is that when the egg has a move input, it wants to rotate long ways from bottom to tip. Once it starts rolling, it's actually really stable, but when starting the movement or slowing down, you might have this little wobble, which can be really hard to counteract without overcorrecting your way off a ledge. This all becomes even more important when looking at the next mechanic, which is egg jumping. Anytime the egg is touching the ground, you can jump, but the jumpiness of that jump is determined by what part of the egg is touching the ground, with the sides giving truly pathetic hops, the bottom with some alright height, and the tip launching the egg into the air. If you happen to be a hibachi grill chef, this is pretty standard stuff for you, but for everyone else, it's going to take some practice because for many parts of the tower, the tip jump is the only way to actually progress. To make it work, you'll also need extreme awareness of distances and how close to the jump the tip will actually be. If you're off even half a rotation, it can be the difference between making the jump and bonking your shell and taking a big fall. In the early sections of the game, it's much more forgiving and you can pretty much jump from any side, but before long you won't be able to get away with just rolling an edge and hoping that it lines up. Just like with normal movement, it's always better to take a second and line up your egg in a way that will touch your tip to the ground in the right place. Once you start doing that, you'll be able to quickly figure out setups that work for you, and a lot of the platforming becomes way more consistent until new obstacles are introduced. And with that in mind, let's talk about the climb. The tower is split up into 6 different segments: the hen house, the farm, the factory, the shop, the kitchen, and finally the attic. Each comes with their own unique flavor and introduces some new hellish mechanic that at times left me almost catatonic, only able to repeat the word why. I consider myself to have almost infinite patience for hard games and have no issues throwing myself at a dumb wall for hours and hours if I'm having a skill issue, but some of the later sections genuinely made me rage quit and swear I would never play Egging On again. Now obviously that isn't true, and I guess it must be because I'm an absolute glutton for cock and ball torture, but I'm really getting ahead of myself again. Starting in the hen house, you've got a little tutorial section that teaches you about jumping and eventually sticks a tall wall in front of you that you need to use your tip on to actually get over. You'll also feel how the egg moves on slopes where you'll need to steer into it to stop your slide. And soon enough you'll be jumping gaps until you hit your first big roadblock, which comes in the form of small platforms. I'd mentioned that the egg is a physics-based object, and what that means is that if it's moving or rotating when you hit the ground, it's going to continue on and it's almost never going to be what you want. Actually learning to jump and balance is really hard for a couple of reasons. The first is you need to have enough force to actually make the jump. If you don't commit, you might come up short, or if you really commit, you might end up flying over the thing you're jumping to. And the second is this egg is so goddamn sensitive, especially when it's not at rest. If it's just sitting there, it takes some serious force to get that thing rolling, but if it's balancing on its bottom, anything will topple it wildly in any direction. Like, I have so much footage of landing on a stupid little beam and instantly flying off because I tapped a key for half a second, and it just makes it feel like you can never really control it. I'll admit there's a pretty high skill ceiling, and of course there will be some god tier gamer freaks that merge their minds with this egg, specifically the only 2 current speedrunners, Softy and Phonius, that skill dipped me into oblivion, but for everyone else there will never not be some level of frustration just trying to get this thing to do what you want. Like, I've played for almost 20 hours in the main game and another 3 in the earlier playtest, and there's still parts of this tower that make me want to curl up into a ball and cry. I think some amount of that is just baked into the concept because you're a dumb little goofy shape, but there's just a little too much dynamic stuff and straight up RNG in certain places for my liking. And speaking of dynamic stuff that I hate, once you make your way up the boards, you find yourself in a nice flat area with a trampoline. The way this should work is that you land on it and it continues your bounce on almost the exact same trajectory from where you landed. My biggest problem with it is there's absolutely no air control in the game unless you're falling far distances, like skydiving from one area of the tower to another. But outside of that, you can only rotate your egg in the air. What that means is you need to have the exact jump as intended to actually make your bounce work. After doing all this tip jumping from edges, it's like burned into your brain to do that exact thing, but in this case it will cause you to bonk on the ledge and have to do it again. But then obviously the next time you put way less spice on it and you still don't make it. And it's another thing that ended up feeling like 20% too janky to ever feel like it was going to do what I wanted. I have a textbook abusive relationship with this thing where it betrays me, then eventually I think we're starting to get each other and maybe I can open up my heart and learn to trust again, and then it spits right in my face, and now every time I interact with it, my anxiety spikes, my hands start sweating, and my stomach drops so fast it feels like it's going to shoot right out my butthole. Luckily this first one is really forgiving, and once you're past that you can breeze right into the farm, which is really just the roof. This is where you get your first lore dump about something called the distortion from the ever-present narrator. And honestly I have no clue what the story of the game is, but I guess the gist of it is there was some event that caused a bunch of chaos, splitting the world apart and freezing a lot of it in place, including every other egg in the world. So now the spirit of I guess some other egg that understandably rage quit in the kitchen and then decided to lie down in hot oil and never get back up, feels some kind of kinship to you and decides to help you on your climb. I honestly don't really know. The important part is there was a distortion and now the level designers have complete freedom to do whatever they want. You'll now run into moving parts, longer balance beam type sections, and some tiny jumps that seriously made me wonder if they were there as some kind of joke or really hard skip. It's a big spike in difficulty, so be prepared to fall off this thing plenty, and I haven't mentioned it yet, but when the egg falls too far, its shell breaks on landing, leaving you as a slippery yolk. In this form, you can still move and jump a bit, but its main power is finding the tiniest crack imaginable and sliding right through it like it's Ant-Man shrinking into the quantum realm. Especially in these earlier parts of the game, it's not uncommon to fall off something, and through a series of unfortunate events, find yourself back in the dirt waiting for your shell to reform so you can start your climb again. After making it past the first big skill check of the farm, you'll be shuttled off towards the factory. And from this point on, the dev expects you to have near complete mastery of movement and tip jumps, requiring you to do back-to-back jumps on small platforms, which includes stopping and changing directions. It's also the point where I started saying screw this and tried sequence breaking everywhere I possibly could. And to my surprise, there are a ton that skip some of the large portions with really inconsistent platforming. A special mention in the factory is this grid of rebar that serves absolutely no purpose except to be incredibly annoying and blocking me from doing this single simple jump a million times. It's actually the perfect example when I say one of my main issues with this game is it's just way harder than it needs to be in ways that aren't particularly fun to deal with. Like this grid could be gone and the experience would only be better for it, because it doesn't add anything to the challenge in a meaningful way. And I think I'm dwelling on this because by this point I was so impatient that I just kept jumping over and over right into it the whole time thinking, who put this fucking thing here? It's such a minor thing, but with every bonk, the question of why is this here took up more space in my brain until it was in a constant buzz and blood started coming out my nose. There are also platforms made of broken concrete that have weird geometry, and it makes them super slippery since you can't really anticipate how the egg is going to behave when it lands, usually ending in it flying off as soon as it touches. It gets even worse when you make it to the shop and have to deal with the ultimate weapon in any Rage dev's arsenal, that of course being ice. When your egg is on ice, you don't have any traction and can't really control which direction you're moving, and rotating is really sketchy. Luckily there's an easy peasy skip, so you can get it down to only one ice jump followed by some crazy platforms and a total asshole of an owl. But just when you leave the shop and think you've made it through the worst of it, you're dropped into the kitchen and are hit with roadblock after roadblock. The first is in the fridge, which is made of 9 unskippable ice jumps in a row, and I completely lost my shit trying to get through them. Initially, ice jumps feel so inconsistent and pretty much impossible. I was seriously wondering if this was playtested by anyone outside the dev team who could have warned them that this was going to be too hard for literally 98% of the player base. Eventually, I figure out you have to lock your camera on a 2D axis in relation to the jump. That's the only way to stop your inputs from wildly rotating the egg in all kinds of directions. And even sometimes it still does that depending on your landings. It took me about half an hour just to get through these ice jumps the first time, and then fell on the very next jump. The kitchen is actually so much harder than the rest of the game, with a trampoline that you need to do 4 different jumps on, rolling paper towel rolls that are so touchy and you pretty much can't recover from if they start moving even slightly in either direction, and at the very end you've got to jump across a bunch of hanging pots, except they're also physics objects and swing when you land on them, making it hard to do anything beyond just hope you can get your tip on that thing before you roll off the side. I think I finished the game with around 10 hours, and I probably spent 5 or 6 of those just in the kitchen falling off of everything. The worst one's taking me all the way back down to the floor, or even out of the map back down to the shop.
Ah.
Why did the egg cross the road? Because that's how it rolls.
The good news though is that it's pretty much the last failable section in the game, and once you get past that to the attic, you end up on a very large pool table that'll catch you if you make any mistakes on the long fan gauntlet. Or you can just do a little tip jump right to the end, making an amazing change of pace from what came before it. If you made it this far, you're just a few jumps away from the end of the game, and the only thing standing in your way is a gigantic flying rooster that came all the way from the hen house, and wants nothing more to... And the only thing that stands in your way is a gigantic flying rooster that came all the way from the hen house, and wants nothing more than to crush you between its toes, the kind of behavior I'd normally have to pay big bucks for. And yet again, this is maybe one of the most overtuned bosses I've seen. What? It's so strong, and the narrator actually dares to say it made the same journey as you.
But he's traveled the same path as you and has overcome the same struggles.
Like, no, I can assure you it did not. I'm an egg that rolls around and jumps like an asshole. And this is a huge bird that can sort of fly. I'm sure it didn't freeze its feathers off ice skating around the fridge, and definitely didn't have to balance itself on cookware to get up here. So no, I would argue our journeys were just a little bit different. Now getting back to the actual fight, the main mechanic is that the rooster jumps in the air, and after a bit makes an audio cue that it's about to land and send anything resting on the ground into the air. It's really just a big upward force, so it also keeps whatever momentum you had when it was applied. It's the same mechanic as an earlier section in the farm, but before the boosting was on a cycle, and here the rooster jumps at random intervals. Whenever you hear the noise, you need to either jump in the air to avoid getting shot up, or just take the boost and hope it doesn't send you off the stage. Once past the first platforms, the rooster can no longer chase you and instead constantly jumps, but you also need to use the force to shoot yourself to different planks. You can also make the jumps yourself, but it's so hard to plan what you're doing, rotate your egg, make the jump, and stop all before the rooster slams down again, sending you back to the start. And I constantly felt like there needed to be a much longer cooldown on its attacks, and sometimes it seemed like it would almost instantly slam down faster than you could possibly react. And essentially any slight mistake here will send you all the way back down to the ground, and you'll have to start over. Luckily you can abuse the unstuck button to skip the roll of shame back, and the entire floor of this arena is almost completely solid floorboards, which are also over the pool table, so the chance of falling out of the arena is close to zero. Unless you're the unluckiest man to ever play the game, and get boosted in a crazy direction, then pushed directly into a crack over the edge of the map and fall all the way back down to the kitchen floor in what I'll forever remember as one of the most tragic moments of my life. I was at the rooster at around 70 cracks, and it took me another 2 hours before I was able to get back to the boss with around 100 cracks. So you could say it was a pretty major setback. During my second attempts at the boss, I decided to take a break for the night and come back refreshed the next day, but then another tragedy struck. My game was completely soft locked. I couldn't jump on any of the boss platforms, and no matter what I tried, it just wasn't happening. I could never get enough height to make it onto the upper section. After 8 hours of grueling climbing, my save was brick. So I reached out to the devs on their Discord, and within an hour they found the problem and sent me back a fixed save. As a fellow game dev, that level of competency brought a tear to my eye. They'd saved my video reading their game for filth, and all my frustrations melted away. It opened my eyes to the humans behind the game and made me realize ice and trampolines are perfectly designed by masters of their craft and are true get-good mechanics that I just didn't see the vision of. Then over the next soul-crushing hour and a half spamming the minute-long rooster run, I realized I was actually right, and they're ass and balls respectively. Like, I can't say it more clear. Fuck this guy, dude. To put it into perspective, there are essentially 9 jumps you have to make to beat him, and that took me almost 3 total hours, and that was at the height of my egg skill. I'm having a hard time even finding the words to explain how much I hated this boss, but I'm hoping that I'll find the footage that can do the talking for me while I'm editing. Once you finally make your way up the final platform, you... Once you finally make your way up the final platform, you just have to roll your way over to the nest and start your new life as the majestic eagle. Beautiful stuff. Now, will we ever get closure on the distortion? No. Do we get to experience the thrill of soaring on our new wings, dropping huge bird bombs on the broken world? Also, no. Your real reward is being one of the very, very, very few who have made it to the top. And I mean very few. When I said the game is too hard for 98% of people, that was based on the real Steam achievements, which show absolutely insane drop-offs to the various parts of the tower, with only 12% of people ever leaving the farm, half of that getting to the shop, only 3% getting to the kitchen, and finally 0.9% of players finishing the game on the intended difficulty egging on, which doesn't have any sort of checkpoints. There is also an assisted difficulty for all the little babies out there who actually like to enjoy the games they play without wanting to throw their monitors right out their window. This mode adds drone pads throughout the game, which you can fly directly back to whenever you fall, and these are placed pretty liberally across the map, so really the most annoying thing is actually waiting for the drone to show up to take you anywhere. It sounds way easier, but it's still a pretty huge challenge since you actually have to do the entire map at least one time. Back to the stats, even with the drones, only 2% of players finish the game, which is just shockingly low. Someone in the Discord posted the Xbox stats, and only only 0.01% of players completed it. And I wouldn't be surprised if that one dude is the only person that finished the climb on the whole console. Now, I'm not trying to say anything about the game by bringing this up, but I think it points to an issue with playtesting. This game is just really hard, and that combined with a super steep learning curve, difficulty spikes, and probably most of all, the initial feeling of a lack of control takes the normal frustration that comes with these games and amplifies it up to an 11. That being said, if it's something you want bad enough, it's super doable, and by the time you finish your climb, you'll be able to return to the bottom of the tower and find the things that felt extreme before can be done without even thinking about it. And that's good, because once you finish, there's not all that much to do except cosmetic hunting. Throughout the game, you'll unlock basic shells for getting to new levels, but there are also rubber ducks hidden around the world that will give you shells when you squeak them, and these are usually placed in super precarious places that you have to do some crazy jumps to reach. There are also stamps you can put on your shell and deliver to some other very specific, very secret place in the world, but if you break your egg, the stamp will be gone and you'll need to go back and reapply it. Some of these are also limited to different difficulties, so you won't be able to just cheese a stamp from the bottom of the map to the top by riding a drone. Some shells also have special abilities, like the retro egg that gives you a second jump, and the rocket egg that lets you boost in whatever direction you're facing, but handles like a total Quaternion nightmare, making it incredibly hard to actually aim this thing, and more often than not runs out of fuel above absolutely nothing. If I'm being honest though, I didn't end up doing much cleanup just because like everything else, these are really brutal. Just finding where a stamp should go is like 5% of the challenge. Trying not to crack my shell through even one full level is a big ask, and some of these span more than half the map, with one of them at the start asking to be taken all the way to the nest at the top. Even still, I got more than enough out of my almost 20 hours, and looking back, I mostly enjoyed my time with it. And if nothing else, I'm glad I stuck through with it to the end. It probably helps that I'm still living on the high of peaking, and while obviously it has some rough edges, I also don't really know what else you could expect from this one. I would love to see more people playing it and pushing for the top, but just prepare your mind and prepare your body for some extreme emotions. Now I'm once again heading off to the Great Gales to get back to peak bagging, so until next time, stay peaking people.